This is a podcast by WellHouse Church, where we talk about what it's like to be a Christian Monday through Saturday, to live as a person of faith in a culture against faith.
So, let's talk about perinatal depression.
Okay.
We have a very special guest today in the studio. Melissa Ware, aka my mother.
And Cullen's mother, too.
And Cullen's mom, too. Yeah. So, when we decided to have a conversation about the large category that is perinatal depression, what you're probably more commonly heard of as postpartum, I personally just didn't feel comfortable having this conversation because
I understand that for multiple reasons.
it's something I will literally never experience.
Right.
But you have had a very personal experience with it. And so I wanted to bring you in to kind of talk about your experience. But first, because this is something that we do, because this is a mental health series, it's important to kind of get all of the stress and anxiety that's weighing on you out in the open before we start having a serious conversation about mental health.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so why don't you tell me about your week?
Well, as you know, but not everybody knows.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of selling our home.
Yeah.
Packing up.
Stressful.
Cleaning out. Moving. Buying land.
Yeah.
All those things are, pretty stressful. So this week it's been pretty up and down with the realtor and things like that with, navigating those waters. But for the most part, it's been okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Just a lot of stress with thinking about selling the house.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's nice to have that place, that you call home.
Yeah.
And when you're in the balance of,
Yeah.
the unknown.
So our listeners don't know this, but as they're trying to sell their house, they're also living in the same RV park as me.
Yes.
So it's so funny because they used to live right across the street from Cullen.
Yes.
And now they live like a 60-second drive from me. And so it's just funny. Family's really important to us, and we're
Absolutely.
all super close.
I want to be close to my babies.
Yeah.
All my babies.
Yeah. So my week, I'm going to be honest, it's been the longest week of my life. I stand by
I've
that.
had a pretty rough week.
I've had a pretty rough week. It's the second week of the semester. Been working like nonstop. I just started my field placement, which is good, but it just adds an extra level of stress. I'm also dealing with some anxieties and even a little bit of depression. And so it's just been a really rough week.
I know. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's okay. It's
I know,
how it happens,
it's life,
right?
but still.
Life is hard.
And all the reason why you got Popeyes because we live in the same RV park.
Yeah, they brought me Popeyes the other night to cheer me up, and because I had a problem with my propane and couldn't cook dinner, and oh my god, it was a mess. And so she brought me she brought me Popeyes, and it made my day. I'm gonna be honest. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Why don't you kind of give us a little bit of your experience with specifically postpartum?
Well, first of all, I'm holding notebook paper, and it makes me feel like I'm back in high school. So kind of cool. Well, when we decided that we wanted to get pregnant, it took me 6 months to get pregnant.
Which adds a level of stress.
Correct. But when we got pregnant, we were so excited. So excited. And so we did all the things, you did all the planning, all the preparing, and down to Lamaze class. I'm not even sure how popular those are now, but I'm willing to say that
You should probably do it.
You should probably do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I went to Lamaze class, and I can't remember how far in we were or whatever, but the night that they discussed postpartum, your dad and I left, and we were kind of cackling about it, thinking, that's not real. That thing doesn't, how can you be, depressed when you have a brand new baby? You have this brand new baby that it took me 6 months to get pregnant with. There's no way I'm going to be depressed. That's crazy. I would have never have thought in a million years that it even really existed. I thought it was, it also kind of had a stigma attached to it.
Always does.
When.
And also that was really new language back in the 90s too.
It was. And, when you talked about things like that, it was always in your head. It's kind of like, I'm just going to even compare it a little bit to like ADHD and ADD and things like that. Back then, it was
people thought
that you weren't disciplining your children.
Yeah.
Another day, another story.
Yeah, sure.
So we're going to move on to postpartum, but we really kind of just blew it off and thought that was a serious waste of our evening. We could have been at home watching
Tombstone.
TV or what? Yeah, Tombstone. We could have been doing anything else, but sitting in a class talking about postpartum depression, and we're going, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and y'all leave this is a bunch of bull.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 6 months into my pregnancy, I was in a car wreck. It wasn't serious, but I was driving, and I was pregnant with you.
Yeah.
And I was rear-ended pretty hard. And at the time, everything was fine. Mm-hmm. But it's still an accident, right? It's still something that causes you some stress.
Sure.
Okay,
especially
forward.
when you're pregnant.
Exactly. Fast forward a month and a half later, I was 7.5 months pregnant. And I was in another car accident. This one a little more serious. We were on I-10, and there was beer bottles being flown out of cars, hitting people's windshields. And so cars were swerving, going everywhere. And we ended up getting hit. Well, when we pulled over on the side of the road to collect ourselves, and by the way, we were coming home from my baby shower.
Yeah.
So that just kind of tells you where I'm at in my thought process in the pregnancy. Just had the baby shower. And in that, as soon as that wreck happened, I felt you turn.
So this was the second one that you felt me
Correct.
turn. Okay.
I felt you do you literally did a somersault. And in that moment, I was thinking, but I feel okay. I don't feel like I'm having any contractions. So we moved along. Well, 2 days later, my water broke. And so with that being said, I immediately went into panic.
Sure.
Your dad was like, oh, yes. He was so excited because it was time. And I'm like, no, it's not time.
Yeah.
It's so not time.
So you're
6 weeks early.
So I'm 6 weeks early.
Correct.
So that means you're about 8 months.
7.5 months.
7.5, 7 3/4 months.
Something
pregnant.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm incredibly early, premature.
Well, you're premature for sure. I wouldn't say incredibly because now I've seen babies,
much more
premature.
But also science and the medical field has
definitely
grown
has
a lot
changed.
since then.
It definitely has changed. So with that being said, we went to the hospital, found out in all of that, yes, my water had broken. They were going to induce my labor. But at the time, when they did the sonogram, they realized that you were breech. Because remember, I told you I felt you do the little somersault? Mm-hmm. So that kind of freaked us out a bit.
Sure.
And I totally expected to have a normal birth. Yes, I was going to take the epidural. But I was going to, so I can't say natural, but I was going to have a normal birth.
Give me the drugs.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So at that time, I found out that I had to have a cesarean.
Yeah.
And that was the only Lamaze class that we missed was on cesarean.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
I
so
mean,
funny.
you know.
Ain't that how it goes?
Yeah, in my case.
Yeah.
I mean, we're wares. What do we say? Yeah.
Nothing is
Everything-
easy for us.
Everything's hard. So I have the cesarean. You come into the world. You're gorgeous. You're beautiful. This baby that we prayed for, hoped for, dreamed of. I mean, down to your little fingers and toes.
Yeah.
But you were not breathing well.
Yeah.
And you went through it. The first 24 hours was really touch and go.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you were so tiny. I was breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And you had to have a preemie bottle because you were so tiny. So it was pump, feed, pump, feed, pump, feed. And all that was fine and well when I was still in the hospital. But
Yeah.
when I was released from the hospital and you were not, that was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Then I had to pump, take my breast milk to the hospital, feed. So on, so on, so on. And this went on until you were released. Well, once you were released, we came home, but you were so tiny in the hospital, you could not have your circumcision in the hospital.
Right.
You had to be circumcised in the doctor's office.
Yeah.
Well, you ended up with a life-threatening bacterial infection. We almost lost you
Yeah.
due to that bacterial infection. So you were back into the hospital when
Yeah.
you were about a month old. You hadn't been home but like a week when that happened.
So let's put this all together in one big kind of narrative, right?
Yeah.
About 6 months in,
Yep.
you have a wreck.
Yep.
Stressful.
Yep.
Traumatizing.
Yep.
About a month and a half later, you have another one.
Yep.
Go into labor.
Worse.
Yeah, another one that's worse. Also traumatic, stressful. You go into labor.
Yes.
I come out. You're trying to give me nourishment, and it's a pain in the butt. And
It was. And
almost nearly impossible.
don't forget the pain of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the pain of giving birth and
They cut through the 9
Yeah.
layers. But then the pain of breastfeeding
yeah. Oh, that too.
when you've never done that before.
So lots of
Yeah.
pain, lots of stress,
Correct.
lots of anxiety.
Yes.
There's just so much trauma surrounding my birth
Yes.
and your pregnancy.
Yes. Plus the family trauma we were having already also. That's a
Yeah.
different story.
That's a different story, but
and I'm
yeah.
not going to go into that, but there was also family trauma at the time as well.
And also, and we're going to talk about this in a bit too, past trauma, if you have past trauma, will make you more at risk for PPD or
correct.
postpartum depression. Excuse me. And of which you don't have to get into, but of which you do have as well.
Yes.
And so all of these things are compounding into one moment.
Correct.
Continue.
So when you're back in the hospital, that is extremely stressful. I mean, almost losing the brand new baby that you prayed for,
Yeah.
hoped for. So, yes, it was extremely traumatizing, so much so that it threw me into a place that I did not even know that I could go.
Yeah.
I was angry. I was distant, withdrawn. My body hurt. I mean, physically my body hurt from
The
the cesarean, but it just hurt. Like I hurt. And I honestly, at the time, did not know what was going on.
Yeah.
Had no idea. Because remember, I laughed in the face of PPD.
Yeah.
But I had, at that point, I was so far gone in my head that I could not put my finger on it.
Yeah.
I had people telling me, oh, just, give it to God, pray
Pray it
about
away.
it. Those great Sunday school answers. But you know what? When you're in the face of that,
It don't work.
that's not helpful. Sure, pray for me. Those kinds of things. That's all. I love that. That's good. But in reality, when you're in that moment, you can't pray.
Yeah.
You can't find that clarity to sit down and have a conversation with God about how you're feeling, because
Sure.
you don't even know why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Yeah.
And I felt guilty for feeling the way I did, having, a brand new
Sure.
baby. And now none of that ever affected my motherhood.
Yeah.
It affected my relationship with my husband,
Sure.
but it did not affect my relationship with you as a baby or Cullen
Yeah.
as a little boy.
So that's fantastic. And thank you for being so honest and vulnerable about that. So let's walk through some of these things.
Okay.
And I'm going to check in with you occasionally, and you can kind of give me
I
firsthand.
didn't mention, though, about how I figured out that I had postpartum depression.
No, you did not.
I probably need to.
Can we do? I think that's
You
going to
want
fit.
to do that during?
Yeah, I think that's going to fit better at the end.
Perfect. Okay.
So you've been hearing postpartum depression, postpartum depression, postpartum depression. I think it's important to note that that is not the only kind of depression that comes from pregnancy.
That's true.
There is a large category called perinatal depression,
Yes.
and postpartum falls under perinatal. There is also prenatal pregnancy. And prenatal pregnancy is, as it sounds, or prenatal pregnancy, prenatal depression, as it
I
sounds.
knew where you were going.
Yeah, is depression that you feel while you're pregnant.
And I did not have that.
Yeah.
I did not.
I
had actually a great pregnancy.
Yeah. Up until the wreck, I guess.
Well, yes, up
Yeah.
until the wreck.
So these are types of mood disorders. So actually, was interesting. I found prenatal depression was not as common about 10 years ago. It's becoming more and more common as
Do
time
you think
goes
it
on.
wasn't common because people kind of felt shame and didn't want to talk about depression?
No. So there was actually a study done over 2 or 3 generations of moms.
Okay.
And they just found that it was more and more common in each generation. I don't know why.
That's interesting.
I didn't read the whole study. I just found that data, and I was like, that's actually really interesting.
That is very interesting.
Currently, in about 2019, approximately 7% of women had prenatal depression. Whereas in postpartum, it was about 1 in 8 new moms had PPD.
Wow.
Which is about 12.5% of
Yeah.
new moms. That's a pretty large number if you think about it in the scheme of things.
No, it really is. And that's why I'm kind of in shock, really.
And so perinatal depression. So I found this quote that I want to read from the National Institute of Mental Health. And it says, perinatal depression is real. Medical illness is a real medical illness and can affect any mother, regardless of age, race, income, culture, or education. Women are not to blame or at fault for having perinatal depression. It is not brought on by anything a mother has or has not done. It is something that happens. Just fundamentally, you can't fight it. There's nothing you can do about it. It happens.
Yeah.
We
live in a fallen world.
Yeah, it's a combination of genetic and environmental factors that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, life stress, past trauma, the physical and emotional demands of being pregnant and caring for a newborn has an impact on your hormones.
And I will talk about that too when we get to it, for sure.
It has this major impact on your hormones that affects the way your brain functions, and you can't help it.
Your body has just gone through a major, even though you're giving birth, it's a trauma.
Sure.
And depending on how you go through birth.
That level of pain can't you know.
I mean, there's a whole different thing of women who go through different types of birth, like cesarean, and your body sustains different types of trauma.
And also, if you've had previous experience with other mental health challenges,
Yes.
as well as past trauma, of which you have had both,
Yes.
it puts you more at risk,
Right.
for some form of perinatal depression. And as you can understand, the things that you feel are common depressive symptoms. Like, I don't want to common, right? Quote unquote,
Sure.
right? It feels and sounds a lot like depression when you get into the signs and symptoms. But the one that is probably the most common, or that we see the most, is guilt and shame in perinatal depression. And that's why I wanted to read that quote that I read earlier, because ladies, it's not your fault.
That's right.
It is not your fault. There's nothing you could have done. You are doing your best, and bringing a child into this world, that's hard stuff.
Absolutely.
And we men will never be able to understand that.
I think that, I mean, you can try to understand, and, you know, the empathy that you feel for your wife as she's going through it. Because, like, your dad had an incredible amount of empathy.
Empathy is different than actually going through it, though.
That is correct. That is correct. But men who support their wives or significant others through, you know, that type of thing, and trying to put themselves into that position is priceless. Let's just say that for all you men out there.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us something that you wish you had heard when you were going through it?
So, to start out with, when I figured out that, you know, I went back to my OB for my, you know, it's a checkup that you go through. And she started asking me how I was feeling. And I almost didn't talk to her about it because of the shame and the guilt of feeling the way I was feeling. And I just really couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt like, okay, why not? So I talked to her about it. And all the while, your dad's voice is in my head going, you know, because I started thinking about postpartum depression, thinking, could that be possible? But your dad's voice is in my head going, oh, that's not possible. That's not real. You know, I said it too. I mean, I was just as guilty. And so when I started talking to her about how I was feeling, she very kindly, sweetly put her hand on my back and said, you have postpartum depression. And I was like, no, that would never happen to me. I mean, I just had this beautiful baby. And she started talking about the different things and the symptoms and the things that I was feeling and why I was feeling that way, and hormonal, you know, changes and serotonin levels and things that I didn't really understand. But she made it extremely clear where I was. And then I'm like, Kevin's never going to buy this, especially with me taking an antidepressant. He's never going to buy this. And she said something very key to me that day that I thought, wow. She said, would your husband deny you insulin if you were a diabetic? And I thought, well, of course not. And she said, it's the same difference. And she said, and if he doesn't agree with any of this, please bring him back so I can talk to him about it.
Yeah.
So she came right beside me. She came alongside me. She walked with me. She checked in on me. It was something. It was something incredible, and that to me was worth more than any of the I'm going to pray for you or I mean, yes, praying for me is good, but pray about it, give it to God. All the Sunday school answers and the things
pray it
that
away thing.
Correct, the pray it away thing that we're all guilty of some of that. But yes, God is good. But something that came to my mind when I was thinking through and praying through postpartum depression was when God came to Moses in the burning bush and told Moses that he needed to confront Pharaoh. Well, at the time, Moses did not feel qualified. He did not feel like he could do the job. And so God himself was there encouraging Moses. God himself was there building him up and showing him all the different signs and the different things that would happen. But Moses still could not feel competent enough to go forward by himself, or himself, period.
Yeah.
And in that moment, God did something for Moses. He brought Aaron to come alongside him to be his voice.
Yeah.
So I think what we need is people to come alongside of us so many times and walk with us through this, journey that we navigate.
Look, ladies, it's not the healthy who need a physician. It's not anything other than you. I'm trying to figure out a way to word this.
You don't have to feel the guilt.
You don't have to feel the guilt.
You don't have to take on the shame, because your Heavenly Father does love you.
Sure.
And when you're not there to be able to pray for yourself or to even be in your right mind, just like Moses, he was not.
He was not.
He was not in his right mind. He was not emotionally strong enough.
But God made a way.
God made the way.
And I'm not, this isn't a pray it away thing.
No, not
Please
at all.
don't hear that.
Absolutely not.
What we're trying to tell you is that you need a support system.
Absolutely.
You need your partner. You need your friends, your family. But most importantly, if you're dealing with postpartum depression, you need professional help.
Absolutely.
You need a physician.
You don't have to feel the shame. God has given physicians just like he equipped Aaron for Moses, he equips doctors for us.
Yeah.
He gives them the knowledge.
And if you need help finding resources, that is what we're here for. Me and Cullen, this is what we do. We want WellHouse to be a place of healing and a place free of shame.
Absolutely.
And if you're feeling shame because of your perinatal depression, talk to us.
Yep.
We can
and
help
I'm here
you.
too. I would be willing
Yeah.
to.
And she would be a great resource for you.
Yep. I would definitely be willing.
But we can help you figure out what you need to do for you, for your family, and for your health.